First, for the Occam's razor, yeah. So basically, the simplest answer is usually the one that makes the most sense, the one that requires the least amount of additional explanation. Because if an explanation requires an explanation, that just kind of pushes it back a step. It's like, what explains that explanation? It's the same with the multiverse. We saw that it itself needs something else in addition to explain its existence. And that's where really God diverges from the explanation of the multiverse. The multiverse is something that's complex in itself, that it itself is made of individual parts, as we saw. That was one of the reasons that it can't be infinite. And these are really two different areas of infinity that we're talking about. God is infinite, but not in the sense that he's made of parts. He's infinite in the sense that he's limitless. You can't conceal him in a space. So these are two different areas of infinite. There cannot actually be an infinite amount of individual parts, but God is infinite and he's not made of parts. So God is a simple explanation in the sense that he's not a complex being. He's not made of parts. He doesn't need an explanation elsewhere. He exists eternally. He needs no cause. So he needs no explanation of his existence in that sense. So that's why it's a simple explanation. The multiverse is not a simple explanation because we saw that it needs something outside of itself to explain its origin. It itself needed a beginning. It needs fine-tuning. It just leaves too many open questions, whereas God answers those questions. It's not because he's a God of the gaps. We just put him on something we don't understand, but it's because he actually answers what we do understand. The more we understand, the more we see that it points to this creator, God. So that's really what it means by the complexity of the multiverse just opens questions, whereas God answers questions. So that's really what the Occam's razor does. It's more about answering questions rather than opening further questions.
Someone could say, like, even though there's no evidence that there's a multiverse, someone could go and say, you know what, but if there is, it's possible, which really isn't a good argument. But even if we give that to them, Occam's razor will go ahead and say, you know what, you're multiplying entities without necessity. And that makes your argument very bad. So I think the main point was that any alternative to the teleological argument kind of goes against Occam's razor because we already have a sufficient explanation.
Yeah, well, that's just it. You said like they might say, well, it's possible. Well, of course it's possible, but that doesn't mean it's the best explanation. We're looking for the best explanation, the most explanatory scope, the most explanatory power. And the multiverse just doesn't offer that. Neither does chance. And then physical necessity can't in principle because it's not the explanation we're looking for because these things could be different.